Bald, money driven, major fraud, breathless, body, diamond, bones. Wanna be it, wanna feel it. Money, power, I'm big, 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 but I'm big, I'm right big, 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 but I'm big, money, power, I'm big, 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 but I'm big, I'm right big, 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 but I'm big.
Yo guys, what is up? Max in our first Descendant video, and today we're going over my full build guide and breakdown for Ultimate Freyna. She's finally here, and she is incredible. Now, I've made a few Freyna builds in the past. I'm going to be talking pretty in depth in this one, even though I've made build guides in the past, because so much has changed. We are building Freyna pretty differently than she used to be built, mainly because of the buffs that happened to her literally yesterday, or technically today. They made some pretty big changes for her when the update dropped. They also added brand new modules that work really well on Descendants that don't scale well with crit. We were kind of having to be forced into crit with Freyna, so we'll talk about using crit versus non-crit for bossing, her new Transcendent modules that dropped, her new best weapons, the new sets, and everything else that you need to know. A ton of testing has gone into this video. Basically, been playing the game for like 14 hours today, just working on Freyna stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let's get right into it. So the very first build that we're going to talk about is the 400% build. Now, the new 400% infiltration operation dungeons are some of the best experience for your weapons, for your Descendants. They drop Transcendent modules like crazy. They drop like mats, such as like tons of weapons for crafting. If you're going to be running dungeons, they are incredibly efficient, and Ultimate Freyna feels like she's built specifically for them. She just has so much AoE and so much damage. So I really wanted to make a build that is honing her to do that content as best as possible. Specifically with the two bosses can be a little tricky, so we wanted to make a tanky build that had a lot of damage and a lot of AoE, and that's kind of what we done with her 400% build. Now I'm going to walk you through all of the mods that we're going to be going through, so you can kind of understand my reasoning for each, because otherwise I think I'd get a lot of questions because I'm doing some weird things. And the first thing to talk about is Contagion. Now Contagion is not what we are using for the 400% build. And you might be like, why would you not use Contagion? And I want to explain my reasoning here. So one of the big changes that they did to Freyna in today's update and in her rework is they added these massive damage dots to her abilities. It used to be that you would proc your Room Zero Trauma, which was like a 10% modifier, it's a little baby damage, and then you could proc Poison on Spread, which was like 60%, and that was a little bit more damage. They've buffed Freyna's damage by 18 times, so her direct damage is way more, and in today's change, she no longer needs damage to spread. You're going to, whenever you hit an enemy with Room Zero Trauma, you're also going to proc Panic on them, for example here, which means you're basically doubling her damage against single targets. Like, they basically just doubled her single target damage today, which is insane. And that works for all of the abilities, for her fourth ability. And the reason I'm not using Contagion is because Contagion removes all of those extra dots. And in some cases, Contagion is actually less AoE. Now, back when Contagion was super meta, it was meta because your spread range was less than the Contagion range, and Contagion would extend your spread range. They buffed Freyna's spread range, and so now, for example, if we look at the one with Contagion on, my Contagion range when killed, when an enemy is killed, is 6 meters. If I take off Contagion, my spread range on Room Zero Trauma goes to 7 meters. So they've kind of power crept Contagion, and to give you an example of that, I want to show you this. So we're going to spawn in a bunch of enemies, right? We're going to make it so that they have the most amount of radius between them. And now we've got 2 enemies, right? we've got no contagion on. We've got just range mods and some extra modifier. But I'm going to basically line myself up with this mob, do my poison on them, and then you'll see that this enemy over here is going to get ticked. We are spreading our damage over to them. Obviously, I don't have like a bunch of mods, so it's not like insta deleting them, but I just wanted to show you that as an example. Now we're going to do that exact same test with the exact same mods, but we're going to put on contagion. That mod is equipped. Let's line ourselves up with this enemy. And they've died. And that enemy is not getting dotted. Same setup, same mods, but now our spread range is actually less. And so that is why we are not going to be using contagion for the 400% dungeon. I know that was a long-winded explanation, but I just kind of wanted to show you that it is now technically like a little bit less range and a little, definitely a lot less damage. So not using contagion. So that brings it to the question, what Transcendent mod are we going to use? For the 400% dungeons, we're actually going to be using Venom Synthesis. Venom Synthesis modifies the third ability to allow us to sprint. We still keep the damage on it. It still does a bunch of AoE, but we actually get 30% movement speed, which is going to allow us to clear the dungeons faster. Obviously, our goal is to clear the dungeons as fast as possible, and this was leading me to faster clear times. We're just going to be spamming the 1 on a 2-second cooldown, and it's going to do enough damage. So now that we've kind of got our Transcendent module sorted, I'm obviously going to be using Focus or Maximize Range and Skill Expansion for the most amount of range on our build. We've got Focus on Tech for some extra cooldown. We are also going to be using Focus on Toxic for more cooldown. And this is kind of the core setup of the build. We've got our range, we've got our damage. Next up, we're absolutely going to want an HP module. The dungeon bosses hit hard. We're going to want some survivability. Next up, we're going to want the 2 brand new modules, Toxic Amplification and I think it's Tech Amplification. This gives us 65% skill power at reducing our skill crit damage by 140%. Basically, our crits will no longer deal increased damage, but we get 65% more power, which is insane. You can farm these new mods. I'm pretty sure this one, I farmed it from the White Knight Gulch Toxic Reactor. But this is such a massive damage increase for Freyna because you weren't able to scale into crit damage on her like mobbing build anyways. So we get to go for that, and we also get to go for the new Tech Amplification, which is 61% more modifier, and now we're critting less, which obviously we don't care because our crits aren't going to deal any more damage. So a huge damage increase for us here. We basically are like doubling her damage, which they also just doubled her damage again. So really amazing setup there. Now we get to add some cooldown. As you can see, our one ability is right now on 9 seconds. Our fourth ability is on 96 seconds. A little too long for us. 17 seconds for our sprint. 22 seconds for our sprint. So we're going to want some cooldown. We're going to be going for MP conversion, which is fantastic there. That's going to cut our cooldowns 12 seconds here, 56 seconds on our fourth ability. We're actually going to go for one more cooldown, is what I ended up really liking. This brings our fourth ability now to a 28-second cooldown. This is enough that you can get this out 3 times typically on your bosses, where in the boss room, you're able to do this ability. The bosses go immune. You shoot at whatever you need to do to make them unimmune, and then you can pop it out again on their second or third phases. This felt really, really great to actually get low cooldown. I normally don't build that much cooldown on her, but really, really nice to build cooldown, and we also get to spam the 1. Spamming the 1 is really nice because it's a tech ability, and this will actually give us more upkeep on our Secret Garden ability, which will give us another 36% damage. So cooldown is something that I've kind of grown a really big fan of. And then lastly, we're kind of using a module that is exclusive for the 400% dungeon builds, and that's why this build is going to be different, and that's going to be HP amplification. At the end of the day, the bosses hit hard, and we wanted more survivability. Obviously, you don't have to go this if you don't want to, but there's a few things that we just don't need. The first thing that we don't need for the 400% dungeons is mana regen. There are so many enemies that you just really don't need things like MP Collector because MP is going to be on the ground all the time. And we didn't go for Decimator because Decimator kind of also got power crept. You could go Decimator in this last slot. Decimator used to be about a 25% damage increase for Freyna. It was like 24 point something damage increase on her build by adding it. Since we added tech amplification, since all modifier is additive with each other, this is now less impactful. This goes down to only a 16% damage increase on the build, which 16% more damage doesn't really matter if we're dead on the bosses. And so that is going to be our 400% build that we're rocking. We've got speed, we've got survivability, we've got damage, we've got range, we've got it all. And this feels really great for running the hardest mobbing content in the game right now. Next, we're going to talk about the bossing build. Now, this is the Giga bossing build because we are sacrificing quality of life and other things for just some raw freaking damage. We are going to kill bosses in 5 seconds with the Giga bossing setup and some new modules. Now, in terms of bossing, the first thing to talk about, once again, is her Transcendent module. In the past, we've been using neurotoxin synthesis. Prior to the Freyna changes, this would make it so your dots did not spread, but they did more damage. After the changes, neurotoxin synthesis makes it so your dots do not spread and they deal less damage. As you can see with my 4th ability, I have room 0 trauma with my weapon, and I have Nightmare, which after the changes today, now Nightmare self-procs on any time that I'm shooting my 4th ability. If I applied neurotoxin synthesis, now I just lost Nightmare. All of my dot damage has not increased. I don't know why they did this. It's pretty frustrating, but neurotoxin synthesis is basically a dead mod. I don't ever recommend using it because it's now less damage and there's really no trade-off for losing the spread. The new mod to use is Freyna's new ultimate, which is Venom Injection. Now, this is a pretty complicated mod that nets out tons of extra damage for Freyna, and it's worth building into if you want to maximize her damage. So this reads that it grants Toxic Sense, which consumes our HP for the duration of the effect, and MP when our HP is at 15%. Toxic Sense increases inversely proportional to the amount of HP lost and has a chance to grant self-purification when using skills. While Toxic Sense is active, attacking the enemy inflicts corrosion on the enemy. So that was a lot. Basically, if we have a lot of HP, this will drain HP from us. If we don't have a lot of HP, it'll drain mana. And it drains 15% of our HP per second, which is not affected by maximized conservation or skill cost reduction things. So pretty hard to stay alive with this active, unless you build around it. When we have it active, we're going to get 66% max modifier increase, which is a ton of extra modifier. You know, that's basically an extra mod on for modifier. It's going to give us 250% toxic resistance increase, 5% of our shield per second, and it is a 30% chance to proc purification, which just removes any debuff. This mod seems like it was made to allow Freyna to fight against the new Deathstalker boss, which is awesome, but we're going to use it for other things besides that. It also will proc corrosion on enemies, which lowers their toxic resistance by 25%, which is disgusting. So it is not only a big modifier increase for us, but it is also a multiplier by reducing enemies' toxic resistance. If you know anything about bosses in this game, a lot of them have toxic resistance. Freyna only has Executioner, who's actually weak to toxic, so this is another huge damage increase. So the question is, how do we build around this? And if you go HP in a boss fight, you're basically dead. Unfortunately, you have to build shields. Now, if we're building shields, that begs the question is, if we build shields, how do we get the most out of this? Because it says that it's inversely proportional, the buff, to the amount of HP that we are sacrificing, right? Well, there seems to be a bit of a bug with this. I don't know if it's a bug, intentional, whatnot, but I'm just going to put on a bunch of HP mods, right? So we've got Stim Accelerant on and increased HP, as well as Focus on Tech and Talk Specialist, basically like a bunch of HP and some damage. If we go to my skill power modifier, here, let me back out of this real quick. So we pop our buff. Our buff is going to drain our HP. As you can see, it takes down very, very quickly. And now we have a 0.596x skill power modifier, right? So we're not getting quite like the full amount of modifier from this thing. It goes up to 66%. But now we're going to put on overwhelming shields, which weirdly enough reduces our HP to 0. And now with this buff, let's just make sure we're being fair. We've unprocced it. Now we will proc it again. Now we're getting 0.663x. We are getting the full amount of damage from this, even though we're actually at 1 HP. Now, if we remove our HP mods, let's reset everything. We are still at 0.663x. So a weird thing that you can do with this is you can get the full amount, even though it says it's based off of your like max HP sacrificed. Overwhelming shields does give you the like, you know, the full amount of the modifier without having to actually like have a lot of HP technically. I guess it is technically sacrificing a lot of HP, but it's a bit of a weird trick that you can use to always have the like max amount of damage from this thing active. So now that you've kind of got the gist of what we're going for, now we can place the rest of the mods. So we're going to be using Tech Specialist and Toxic Specialist to get a bunch of damage. We're going to be using Overwhelming Shield, which is going to give us a bunch of shield at sacrificing our HP. But remember, this is going to give us the max amount of damage from our Venom injection. We're also then going to put on a shield module here for some increased shield. This is going to give us some increased survivability because we're not going to be getting a ton of survivability on this build. So we want at least a decent bit. So increased shield there. Then we're going to want a duration mod. We want to be able to comfortably cast our full fourth ability so that we don't miss out on any damage. So skill extension works out really well there. We are then going to go for dangerous ambush. When we knock a boss, we're going to get another 50% skill power modifier, or sorry, skill power, which is absolutely disgusting with her. And then that's kind of our base. And then we've got a few more things to go for. Now, we could, with the rest of these, socket 4 crit mods. And in testing, 4 crit mods is actually worse than just using toxic and tech amplification, getting 65% more power and making all of our damage super high and super consistent rather than having to rely on some RNG crits. It felt just way better. We were getting way more consistent runs and faster runs without going for your crit. So we're going to go Toxic Amplification for the more toxic skill power damage. Tech Amplification is going to give us more modifier. And then we've got, you know, a little bit of space for some extra mods. Here we're actually going to be slapping in Spear and Shield. This is going to give us more defense for a little bit more survivability, but also more skill power. And then we can also go for Venom Succinctium for even more power, and that's going to round out the build. Now, if you wanted even more survivability with this, you could lose Spear and Shield and Venom for double HP mods, and then you would actually get up to a fair bit of HP if you wanted to go that route. This is the Giga Bossing setup, though. I wanted to just make it as much damage as possible. But if you are worried about survivability or you want to play in a group, I'd recommend just following my normal bossing build. But if you did want more survivability here, you would go for double HP mods here rather than Spear and Shield and Venom. You wouldn't notice too much of a damage difference, and you would get a lot more HP. I just wanted to kind of keep this build where you don't have to recatalyze a ton of things. And obviously, we're not going to be using like 4 circle mods on any of the other builds. So we're able to do this and not have to spend a bunch of extra catalysts. For the normal builds, they're pretty standard. Don't need to go as in depth for an explanation of them. Basically, we're just doing the 400% build, but instead of an extra HP mod, because we're going to be doing normal mobbing, this is like any other content outside of the 400% dungeons. We're going to want an MP collector so that we can spam our abilities. That's super great quality of life. And then like here, technically, we're catalyzed for nimble. which you just don't really need with Contagion. So like Nimble is what I've got catalyzed here because I catalyzed in the 400% build. That's more than fine. You don't really need Nimble for Contagion because you're spread in like AoE. Like you'll be able to clear out a single room with one ability, so you don't really need the extra cooldown. I personally would actually go on this slot if you wanted to fully spec out the normal mobbing build. I would go Decimator. Decimator here allows us to make up a little bit of the damage that we're missing from missing out on that extra like modifier that Contagion gets rid of. So then we get all of the 400% build, but the big difference is we're losing a bit of cooldown and we're losing a bit of HP, but we're getting more damage, we're getting more mana. This is also a really nice way to play. You don't have to use Contagion if you don't want to, but for just AoE mobbing, this is going to feel really, really good. And then the normal bossing build, once again, we're not going to be using Venom Injection because this is going to be more of a quality of life build. We're going to actually be using Toxic Stimulation, which allows us to grant Plague Armor to our teammates, which is one, really nice because all of our teammates, when they get buffed and they get hit, can proc damage on the bosses. So you can actually think of this as a damage increase for your bossing. But you're also able to buff up your teammates to give them more defense. And then we're going to be going kind of the exact same build. But the difference with here is because we're not going crit, we get to go for a ton of cooldown. And this is going to be the build that I think most of you are going to like a little bit more because the ultimate is going to be on a 28-second cooldown, and we're not really losing any damage. We're not using Venom Succinctium here, but we are still keeping the Spear and Shield. So we've got HP, we've got defense, we've got damage, we've got cooldown, we've got duration, and everything here will feel really, really great to use. You've got good survivability, good cooldown, good damage. And so if you're looking for a more standard bossing build, this is the one I'd recommend. If you really want to nuke bosses as a solo player as fast as possible, this will do some disgusting things for you. Real quick, this is the full Catalyst layout. If you want to copy all of these builds, obviously for the normal mobbing, you'd want to add an extra X slot here for Decimator, but this is kind of the like base of what we're using. Real quick, I did want to just showcase like a setup that you could use / talk about Freyna's other Transcendent module, which is Toxic Mixture. I haven't messed around with this too much, to be honest, but this thing does have some pretty interesting use case scenarios. Basically, this makes you lose your dot damage, which, you know, for me, I want to play Freyna as like the poison AoE damage dealer, so not as interested in this mod, but basically it allows her to turn Freyna into more of a gun character, so you lose your dot damage, but in turn, your abilities build up Necrosis. Necrosis really doesn't do all that much while it's stacking. However, if you get to max stacks of Necrosis on an enemy, which you need to get to 100 stacks, so obviously this is for bossing, you're not going to be stacking up this 100 times on a trash mob, but if you get to 100 stacks, you then get 90% firearm attack increase, which is insane. That's a ton of firearm attack, and you get firearm critical hit rate. Note that this is critical hit rate on the enemy, so it's not like a actual crit rate increase that you would see. It's just when you're shooting an enemy, you're going, those shots hitting them will have 11% increased crit chance. So that's pretty nice. But the bigger thing here is that you shred firearm critical hit rate resistance. I don't know if this stacks with other Freynas. If it does, 4 Freynas with this on tough bosses that have crit resistance, like Gluttony, could be insane. But basically, you're able to, with like the build, you basically just want to keep bosses debuffed at all times. So not only are you going to be dealing 90% more gun damage to them, but you're also going to be then shredding crit resistance for you and your team for long extended fights like Deathstalker, like Gluttony. If you did want to bring Freyna in, this is going to be a really, really great option. I just did a quick little build setup. Basically, we've got maximized conservation so that we've got a lot of skill cost reduction so we can spam our skills. If you go from 99 stacks and drop it at 99 stacks and it goes down to 0, you don't gain anything from this. So it's really, really important that your dots are going to be lasting on the boss for a while, and that you have enough cooldown and cost so that you can spam I didn't like fully min-max this, but basically we've got some cooldown from focus on toxic and tech. You could use level 1 versions of this if you wanted to. Then we've got maximized duration for more duration with skill extension. Basically what this is going to do is it's going to give us our dots on a really long duration. So our necrosis stacks are going to last 8.8 seconds. All we need to do is hit an enemy with one ability or one bit of our dot damage, and this will fully refresh. So 8.8 seconds is basically your window to refresh stacks. And obviously, we've got a cooldown of 5.6 seconds. So as long as we've got the MP to cast this, we've got 100% uptime on Necrosis. You are going to want to use your 4th ability to get up to stacks. Our 4th ability fires like 80 bullets. So just this alone will proc 80 stacks of Necrosis. And then you can just use your 1 ability to get like the rest of the stacks. So MP conversion is really nice for that. HP. Skill extension, shot focus for more gun damage, and then just for like Deathstalker, I just threw on toxic antibody for more toxic resistance and perfect anti-venom so that you can't be poisoned. If you wanted to like really min-max this a bit more, I would throw on nimble fingers to get even more cooldown instead of like toxic antibody and just rock perfect anti-venom, but didn't fully recatalyze for this. But if you want to play Freyna this route for gun damage, you definitely can. You throw on an Enzo with toxic mixture so that you have 90% gun damage and a ton of crit rate. Could be pretty nutty. Next up, we can talk about my build for the Secret Garden. Now, I thought the reactor changes were going to go live today, and we weren't going to have to do something like this, but because they didn't, I did have to modify my Secret Garden. And the one thing that I want to make very clear here is this is not a build for the Secret Garden to do a lot of damage. And what I mean by that is sharp precision shot just does not work for the Secret Garden. We're using the Secret Garden for Freyna's 4th ability. Freyna's 4th ability is not affected by the Secret Garden's special ability. The Secret Garden has a special ability that makes it insane on Freyna that whenever we're using a tech skill, we get pest control, which gives us a bunch of skill power. This is like 37% skill power, which is disgusting. And it does not affect the 4th ability. So we do not need to be holding the Secret Garden to get our ultimate to do a bunch of damage. And on our bossing build, I'm not using the Secret Garden, which I'll explain in a second. But if you wanted to use the Secret Garden, for example, in 400% dungeons, you want a gun that can shoot the enemies, that you can deal damage with, that you don't have to swap to use your ultimate. Obviously, for example, if I was to pull out a Python that was set up for Freyna's ultimate, and I swap from my Secret Garden to my Python, all of a sudden, I'm losing 160% damage. Or sorry, 60% damage. So we don't want to be doing that. So what I set up on the Secret Garden is basically a build that allows you to shoot the gun, do a bunch of damage with it, but you're not going to lose any DPS for Freyna's 4th ability. So that's why we're using Sharp Precision Shot. Sharp Precision Shot, you may notice that we're not modifying duration on Freyna. Sharp Precision Shot will allow us to get all of our shots off in the time so that we don't have to build duration. So this is super important. Once again, doesn't work for the Secret Garden. It does work for Freyna's 4th ability. What also works for Freyna's 4th ability are mag size mods, expand weapon charge, and concentrate support ammo. Concentrate support ammo is not the most amount of mag size that you can get, but it also gives us that crit damage, which is nice for our Secret Garden. So, it's a little buff there. And then we also go for fire rate up, which is going to give us even more fire rate. The rest of the mods are entirely optional. You don't need them. You just need these mods to make Freyna's ultimate good. The rest of the mods are just on there so that the weapon hits pretty hard too. But the rest of the mods that I'm wearing do not affect her 4th ability. They will not increase the damage that you're dealing. Only fire rate and mag size mods will increase Freyna's ultimate's ability. So my bossing weapon is quite literally just the Albion Cavalry gun with Sharp Precision Shot, mag mods. We're going to be using Compulsive Magazine. This gives us 9% more mag, but 10% less weak point. The weak point doesn't matter. With weapon charge for more magazine and fire rate up. Once again, the weapon that you're using for Freyna's ultimate does not matter. If you really wanted to min-max, you would technically use an impact weapon because impact weapons have slightly better versions of Sharp Precision Shot because they trigger every 0.4 seconds rather than every 0.5 seconds. So you can stack it up a little bit faster. But The only reason I'm using the Albion Cavalry is because I have a half decent reactor for it. Literally, I just have gold damage when attacking a Colossus. I really need to go farm a better reactor. I don't know why I haven't, but I use the, this just Albion Cavalry one with damage to Colossus just to show you that the gun doesn't matter. We just need a damage to Colossus roll on our reactor, and ideally a toxic damage or a tech damage buff. I'd recommend probably tech, but either or, and damage to Colossus will give you your best bossing results. Once again, the actual gun mounting really does not matter. Whatever gun you get for it, I would just recommend speccing it. If you can find gold of both of those, just use that weapon. And for mobbing, I was using a secret guarded mounting with tech skill power boost ratio and range. The range is actually overcapping us on range, so you don't really need range. I think my god tier reactor for Freyna would either be double boost ratios, meaning tech and toxic boost ratios, or a boost ratio and cooldown for mobbing. I think would be really, really nice. Range is nice, but it does overcap us by 20%, I think, on our range, so not necessary. For components, I'm going to be honest, I'm just using comfy components. I love my two-piece Annihilation set with my defense and MP recovery modifier and my Annihilation sensor that rolled god tier with MP recovery in combat and max MP. If I find another sensor that rolls god tier like this, I would use it, but I just can't seem to take this thing off. It's too great. Then I've just got my normal HP double roll on here and a Slayer set which rolls higher HP. This gives us a lot of really nice survivability. On the Giga Bossing build, we are sitting at... Oh, wait, sorry, not the Giga Bossing build. The 400% build, we're sitting at 19,000 HP and 10,000 defense, which is very, very cozy. In terms of bossing, the best bossing set for raw damage is still Slayer set. Slayer set is still her strongest for raw DPS for bossing. However, there is a new set that just dropped called the Distorted set, which is also pretty good specifically for her Giga Bossing setup, which is her low health, high shield setup. I've killed the Deathstalker a bazillion times. I've built multiple Frostwatchers now, but I still have yet to get the sensor to drop, so I can't test the 4-piece bonus. But basically, just to show this off to you, we're gonna get on the Giga Bossing setup, we would get 14.3% toxic skill power, which is really nice. Slayer gives us 26%, so still pretty off from Slayer, but 14% toxic skill power is very nice. Then we have a 5% chance to recover 3.2% shields each time we inflict an enemy with a debuff. So where we're constantly shooting, we're going to have a chance to recover our shields, which is really nice. And if we destroy a part, which is really easy, we'll proc Exaltation, which fires a guided projectile towards the Colossus on skill attack, which deals 9.7% of our skill power. And when Desolation's proccing, the Colossus's attack will get lowered. It is a lot of things going on, but basically, at the end of the day, 26, bigger number than 14. So I think Slayer still wins out. All of these effects are cool, but when we're killing a boss in 5 seconds, it's just not really going to matter all that much. I would just go for the higher raw damage. We're not caring about the Colossus losing attack or launching 9.7% of our skill power once every 7 seconds. The fights aren't even lasting 7 seconds. So that is why I recommend Slayer still. Guys, that's going to do it for the build video. I hope you enjoyed. At the end of the day, there's a lot of ways to build Ultimate Freyna. My build guide is just the way that I enjoy playing her, and I hope it gave you an idea or a reference that you can use to make your own builds or follow mine. I will catch y'all in the next video, guys. Take care. Peace.